So how long have you been out at INL anyways?
It'll be my 6-year anniversary on May 10th or something like
Yeah.
that.
And you grew up in Washington?
Grew up in Washington,
What part?
Yakima.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
The baseball state championship of the
Yeah,
world. Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah.
State fair, state championship baseball,
The state fair's in
wrestling.
Puyallup.
Is it the Eastern Ide?
Oh, maybe there's no, I don't know. If you guys had a
It's like
state,
the big fair.
I'm sure you had one. The big state fair that I was aware of was in Puyallup. My wife would say that.
We're gonna have to call the governor and find out who actually owns the state fair.
Yeah. Puyallup definitely says it's their state.
Yeah, well, so does Yakima.
Oh,
And I wouldn't want to get in a fight with Yakima, you know.
yeah.
Depends on the time of day, I guess.
Played ball
But
with some Puyallup guys. They're tough as well.
oh, that's fair.
I mean, we're all Washingtonians, so hopefully we can figure it out.
Oh, of course.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Sun Dome is really,
Yep.
yeah, so.
So grew up in Yakima, and then you're now in Idaho Falls, or which?
I was in Idaho Falls, so I have moved to Idaho Falls twice and left twice.
Yeah.
So now I actually work out of INL's Boise office,
Oh,
so I
gotcha.
live in Boise.
Yeah. Which do you like better?
Oh, wow. That is a non-popular question. The way that I describe Idaho Falls is that it raised me in a lot of ways. Like
Yeah.
I grew up in Yakima, but I left at 17 and haven't been back.
Yeah.
So I graduated from college and went straight to Idaho Falls at 21. And so I spent a lot of time growing up there.
Yeah.
But I like Boise for this part of my life a lot.
Wild town, that Idaho Falls.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Beautiful city.
It is.
I really, man, it's nice and hot. The river goes through town.
Oh yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I did a really nice job thinking out how to utilize the river and the, pretty landscape without overdoing it. And
Yeah.
It's a very cute, quaint town.
Yeah, I like it. And the Idaho National Lab is right next door.
That's right.
Right. So
Yeah.
and first of all, where'd you go to school? What'd you study?
Eastern Washington University.
Mhm.
I studied economics.
For red?
Yeah, yes. I thought I would be on brand today.
Mhm.
No, it's just my favorite power color. But
Yeah.
yep, I'm an Eagle.
Nice.
Very proud alumna. And then I studied economics, so I'm actually an economist by trade, and I've ended up in this role through a variety of,
Sure.
opportunities,
Yeah.
as it were.
Yeah.
But yeah, loved every bit of it.
Did you study labor economics much in college, or did you or what other areas of economics did you enjoy?
Sports economics is actually my preference,
Yeah.
but I recognize the writing on the wall, a good economist would. So
Sure.
I said, I'll study labor economics, and then if I end up in sports, cool. If not, that's all right.
And what is sports economics? Is it the same as sports management? Just how those markets work?
A little bit, mostly specifically the team recruiting side. Statistics and ratios and ranking players and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Billy Bean.
Yeah.
I love that movie. What was his name? Obviously Brad Pitt, but you're seeing Moneyball.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Jonah Hill.
Yes, I'm I don't.
He did a
cannot
good
remember.
job.
Yes, Jonah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some good parts. So both in labor though, I loved economics. I did a lot of economics courses. I had I was raised in pretty conservative households. Like my parents actually started the company that I'm still a part of to some extent.
Oh wow, very cool.
And so a lot of discussion around the dinner table around business and finance and go-to-market stuff.
Yeah.
My dad would typically get eventually he's like, okay, that's enough, because my mom ran the business, and my mom was always kind of go and in the business. But so I went to school, and I had a professor named oh my gosh. So I'll tell you later.
Okay.
He was a huge Milton Friedman fan.
Okay.
And Milton Friedman is having a little bit of a renaissance right now. Have you noticed this? And I don't know what school of economics do you ascribe to?
It's changed over the years. So I will say unsubscribed at the moment.
Open-minded?
Yes. Especially as I came from Washington State and then, was pummeled into hyper conservative Idaho, which has been very eye-opening for a
Yeah.
lot of reasons, and it's really shaped the way that I look at economics and
Sure.
look at markets. So
Yeah, I'd imagine they're pretty small government, free market economic type thinkers.
certainly, but they're
Yeah.
also very community oriented.
Sure.
So it's this very interesting
Yeah.
clash, I'll say,
Yeah.
of those two kind of opposite theories.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing that has kept me in Idaho,
Sure.
quite frankly, is this balance between kind of the free capitalistic market while also, providing for your neighbor.
Yeah.
Is this really incredible community balance.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, if we're helping each other, the government has to do less. I think
Yes.
the government stepped in areas where people weren't helping each other, right?
Yep.
And
That's
yeah.
should be the role.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, cool. So, did you ever think you'd work when you go back in college, think about you're 20, 21 and
Yep.
at Eastern, and now you're at a Department of Energy lab that does a lot of wild stuff.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about that. But did you ever think you'd be at a DOL facility or DOE facility?
Never.
Yeah.
So following the sports theme, I went to Eastern specifically to do sports medicine. That
Yep.
was why I chose Eastern as my university. I'm a rugby player, so
No way.
very familiar with all things athletics, and it's very much a core of my being.
I have to interject. Malcolm Gladwell just came out with Tipping Point 2.0 or something. That's it. He's out of a behavioral economics,
Uh-huh.
and he had this chapter on women's rugby.
Oh, I'll have to read it.
It's bizarre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe not so bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just had one of those life-changing moments. I don't, where you can pinpoint it in a moment. You don't have many of those. When my entire perspective on what I wanted to do with my life changed in the middle of a rugby match. And so
Did you get hit in the head or something?
I did not, but I did watch someone get brutally injured.
Oh, no.
And I watched the athletic trainer run onto the field, and I was just it was snowing, and I'm like, this is not for me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I happened to be in an economics 101 class. I had the opposite experience, I think, of you growing up. My entire family is kind of blue collar trades, worked in the same job at the same company for 30 plus years.
Yep.
So there was very little conversation around the dinner table, quite frankly.
Sure.
And so I'd never, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Just office politics, but none of the good stuff.
Not even.
And so I had never taken economics. The high school that I went to was very rural, very agriculturally focused. And this one professor, she just was very profound and found a way to connect, how the world of economics works in community, in people.
Yeah.
And ultimately that was kind of the driver for me, which is, I think, this kind of connection to Idaho too, right?
Yeah.
That seems to be where my theory base lives. And so I switched majors and I finished my degree in economics. And the promise that I made to myself was wherever I got offered my first economist job, that's where I was going.
Nice.
And out of school, I got offered a labor
What made you
economist
say
job.
that? That's quite a bold statement.
Yeah, I'm hell-bent on not failing in my mind, and failing to me would have been not being willing to take a leap if I was handed an opportunity.
So you wanted to roll the dice with the opportunity granted. That's cool.
Yep. And I was offered my first economist job in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Yeah.
So I took it.
Yeah, well, it's a great place to land. I mean, talk about a microcosm of labor economics. It's the biggest employer, I think, in Idaho, I would imagine. The lab.
Idaho is the 5th largest employer in Idaho.
Oh,
yes, we have some competition.
Yeah. Who are the other bigger ones?
Albertsons
is
is up there. Department of Education or school. Micron.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I don't know. There's a couple others.
Yeah.
There's some actually big players in Idaho.
Yeah. It's a great. I get to go there sometimes and hunt. I love bow hunting and archery hunting.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law got me into it. And growing up, I wish I could have gotten over there more often. We got to Spokane and Coeur d'Alene a little bit for baseball and stuff. But so what was the job?
I was a labor economist for the Department of Labor. So I went from DOL to DOE.
Oh.
Very small change.
Yeah.
So I was offered a regional
Department
labor
of Labor
economist job with the Department of Labor. Yep.
Was it, oh, so it had nothing to do with INL.
Mm-mm.
So Idaho National Labs, so it was Idaho Falls DOL job.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I
Nice.
represented the eastern part of the state. That was like my geography.
Nice.
And my role was really to make sure that I could use my skill set and the resources of the Department of Labor to help elevate those regional communities, those industry partners, have really honest conversations about labor the competitive market for the labor force. You know, why were we having problems attracting labor force to that region, specific industries, those kinds
Yeah.
of things. So I spent 3 years doing that. And I think just like built some really incredible partnerships.
Nice. Who'd you work for? Which department? Like, how's it structured, and kind of who are the main constituents?
So I worked for the labor statistics and analysis group out of
like-
Department of Labor, which is out of Boise.
Okay, I've been on the BLS site before.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So there's a BLS team under that grander umbrella, and we were like the regional economist economic analysis part of things, but we would work with the BLS team quite a lot. So each state has a team of labor economists through the Department of Labor. Depending on the size of the state, the team size varies. In Idaho, we would have 5 or 6, depending on who was kind of where representing what. And so I had the Idaho Falls job. So I lived out in Idaho Falls, lived in the region. But the core of the team, right, was in Boise. So I would travel back and forth pretty often.
Nice. And then constituents, were they employers also? I mean, workforce development groups, like, and what was the mission? Just to sort of help be connective tissue? Like, what's the mission of the group?
Yeah, connective tissue, certainly. I think mostly education, right? I did a lot of public speaking. I still do, but at that time it was really helping employers or the local community college and universities, even the city, county, regional leadership recognize, like, okay, we're trying to market to have people move here to take on the jobs because we're growing faster than we have a labor force for. How do we mitigate those issues? Where are the breakdowns? I spent a lot of time with the local hospitals. They're having a really hard time keeping some of their staff in certain occupations. So doing wage analysis to help them be competitive. So the charge was really to enhance the regional economy through workforce data. How can I help them do that? How can I connect them with resources they don't have? I think I really kind of based my success in that role around coalition building.
Yeah.
So I became very good at recognizing where data plays a role and how that can inform decisions in a really positive way. But ultimately, it's the people and the teams that you put around the table that, you know, use that data for good.
Yep.
And so I spent time doing that. I traveled a lot. I was never really, I was in Idaho Falls. I lived there, but every week I was in Salmon or Driggs or Power County or Butte County, or you name it. Pocatello. Yeah.
Great name.
Good old Pocatello.
Great town.
Yeah.
That's cool. BLS statistics, Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. How accurate is the BLS data set? Like, I mean, give us the good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, I think it's really powerful. Yeah. I'm just curious, like, your thoughts on the data quality and whatnot.
BLS is our baseline, right? So without BLS, we don't have anything else, especially on the national level. So it's really important for those reasons. Is it perfect? No. No data set is. Where I've found like a really nice balance is BLS is on a national platform, right? Their job is to project for the country. Their job is to recognize labor trends across the country, and each state helps kind of build up to that bigger picture. The benefit of a state like Idaho is that if you know enough people, you know everybody. And so you can get a whole lot more information.
Manual census every 6 months, right?
And for the energy industry now, I do that. Pretty close, at least.
What do you mean? We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Keep going, please.
So we, I think, have a really unique position, being a smaller state, to inform the BLS on, you know, industry traffic, workforce change, projections for population, those kinds of things, and be a lot closer to reality than some other states have the opportunity to do, just simply because of our size, and our impact. So I think that it's as accurate as it's going to get from a macro perspective. the more informing that specific localities and regions can do, make that data better.
Yeah.
But they're doing the best with what they can.
Yeah. I have no complaints with it. I sometimes just wonder, is this?
I mean, there's gaps. There just are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do a lot of mapping around the occupational count across the country. And one challenge we sometimes have is just figuring out, when you have a craft, especially like an electrician, ultimately we want to understand how many electricians are needed in this industry versus that industry versus that industry.
Yep.
So it's a wealth of information, but I'm excited to see maybe the VLS will roll out some agentic AI on top of it soon, and chat GPT querying going on.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, and a lot of labor hours to make that happen.
Oh my gosh. So is the data mostly collected? I mean, there's tons of different types of data, but is the census a major drawing data source?
Yeah, so they use the BLS survey, like occupational survey, where you basically have the historical data that informs the projectionary work.
Yep.
And then they go back through these BLS teams that exist in the states, and then they do occupational surveying.
Gotcha.
On top of that. Obviously, the census work and the population count, those kinds of things inform that historical data and the projectionary set and the regression models. But I think that the biggest kind of alternative or mechanism for improving is in that occupational survey, because that's where you're creating a database that does not exist historically, right?
Yeah.
So you're adding as much information as you can to inform the current and the future that you don't have historical data to represent.
Yeah. We found the I don't know what you call the data set, but the salary data per role in different metro areas across the country. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I assume a major driver of that is you're talking about the occupational survey.
Yep.
So yeah, it's nice that it certainly adjusts for cost. It's the market rate for that role.
Yep.
Based on market economics, labor economics, real estate, cost of living, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
So, very cool. We could nerd out on economics
For a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how Milton Friedman, going back to him, has had a renaissance with, I think a lot of people are not too excited about a lot of the waste that's coming, government spending waste.
Yep.
And it's interesting. A lot of it, I mean, some of it's getting politicized, but it's there's a few things that a lot of Americans agree on. It's like the future well-being of everyone's children.
Yeah,
our children.
certainly.
And then the other one I've heard people talk about is just like some of these programs that we're just like, no one can understand, why are we spending money on that? So we should we'll tell everyone why we're here, and maybe we'll go relax later and talk economics.
There you go.
So how did you get over to so you're at the DOE for 3 years. How'd you land at INL?
Actually, the Department of Labor in Utah offered me a job.
Okay.
So as much as I loved Idaho Falls, I was like 24 and looking for that nightlife.
Yeah.
Part of my 20s, and I thought,
You didn't find that Idaho Falls?
wow, and you know what? Now it's so much better, which is like so depressing. You're like, God, I would have really loved that 10 years ago. But and so I had an opportunity to move down to Salt Lake City and experience true metropolitan life. And so I took a job in Salt Lake City, and it's the same position, but in Salt Lake. So elevated population, different economic challenges.
Yeah.
So I was excited about that. Moved down to Salt Lake City, sold my house, and I made it about 2 weeks down there before INL called.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I liked Salt Lake a lot. I just ended up down there for about 6 months, and then I finally said, okay, I can't pass up this opportunity with DOE, with Idaho National Lab.
Yeah.
They were starting to recognize like the work of a labor economist, the work of workforce development forecasting, how that impacts their ability to do their job, to obtain and continue to grow the laboratory is going to be really important.
Yeah.
And so they created a role for me and brought me back to the lab.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's really neat. I'm sorry you can say in Salt Lake long, but 6 months is, I mean, you probably got a little bit of exposure down there and saw what it was about, but
Yeah.
so you flew back up to Idaho Falls, sounds like, and
Yep.
then what was if you could have, I mean, use the OKRs methodology, like objectives and key results, what was your first year? Like, what was your mission? What were your objectives and key results?
At INL.
Yeah.
To author the methodology for INL's workforce forecast,
Okay.
which we publish annually now and have been for 5 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that is trying to serve all the management there in terms of, help me understand it, placement opportunities, or like.
So it's kind of like this really nice, like I was alluding to earlier. If you only have historical data, there's stuff missing, right? You asked a really pertinent question about BLS's work.
Yeah.
And so being able to shrink that down to a company size, you can fill in a lot of those gaps. So the main impetus for doing this was actually not internal, right? I think, you ask a hiring manager at INL who they need and what they need, they'll tell you. And they're working towards that. It was actually for our external partners. So being the 5th largest employer in Idaho, we get a lot of questions from our universities, our community colleges, our legislature, our governor's office. They want to know, how do you keep Idahoans here and doing the jobs that are already in Idaho for Idaho employers? And so there are almost 6,400 INL employees now, and everybody had their own answer as to what INL needs. So depending on who was at whatever restaurant in downtown Idaho Falls at that time, right, the community college president was getting a different answer than, the university president was, etc. So the main driver was essentially to be able to answer that question from a holistic perspective and give enough detail that those education partners, those legislators, etc., knew exactly what we meant when we said this is what INL's workforce needs are.
Yeah. So they could prepare better. Like from high schools and community colleges, universities there, even transitioning military.
Yep.
What were some takeaways? What were some things that you all learned that were surprising?
Surprising, I wouldn't say as much if you pay attention to labor economics, but of course the lab's role is to do research and development. And that has always been, since it's been INL, and before that, the role is to do research and development primarily on nuclear energy, but lots of other advanced energy and national and homeland security focus areas. But in that, we have focused a lot of our recruitment efforts, certain areas of the workforce, in particular, a lot of time with grad fellows, PhD students, people who have 30 years worth of experience in the nuclear field. And what these projections, especially the first year, kind of highlighted is that, yes, those people are incredibly important and they're hard to find and there aren't that many of them. And we need to continue to put effort into recruiting them. But almost equally as important is our technicians, our workforce tradespeople, our facility service people, those types of roles, because the labor market has been tightening for so long. I think historically we've just been able to kind of pick those people up locally and train them into their roles, and that's worked out just fine. But with the tight labor market, right, just like everybody else, we're suffering from not having that access anymore.
Yeah.
And so really for the last handful of years, we've been ramping up these other priorities, which is where community colleges really came into focus over the last handful of years for the laboratory. Extended partnerships with all of our craft suppliers, our union partners, those types of training entities, and being able to bring all those people to the table and have those conversations for the first time in a long time, that workforce projection work really kind of set us up to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much there. I assume that you're in your 5th year now with that?
Just published 5 years. Yeah.
We should back up. So it'd be super helpful to get an overview. I'm sure you've learned a lot more about nuclear energy than you ever thought you would.
Certainly.
Going to for being a major in economics. But yeah, what does Idaho National Labs do? Like, I know there's dozens of research areas and whatever they're called. So help us understand that.
So Idaho National Laboratory is one of DOE's 17 national laboratories. INL specifically is an applied research laboratory. So we do some fundamental research in science, but the goal of INL was specifically to take that fundamental science and research, enhance it, and then apply those principles in whatever pilot etc. Application we can. So the idea is that INL is bridging the gap between the fundamental science and commercializing those technologies. So at INL, it's this microcosm of industry partnership with those fundamental research and science roles, all kind of in the same place, which is really incredible.
Yeah.
So nuclear energy has really kind of been a core, still over 50% of our mission. We do have missions in other energy sources. We're talking a lot about green hydrogen right now, batteries, you name it. And then national and homeland security, cybersecurity, industrial cybersecurity has really kind of popped up as another major priority for DOE, DOD, and INL has, really expanded our expertise and our portfolio in those areas.
And I'm familiar with, I'm sure some of the listeners are, Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos, Jefferson, the really neat one in the Bay Area that was a setting for the Star Trek movie. You hear about this?
I'm not a Trekkie, unfortunately,
yes,
but
it was one of the newer Star Trek movies.
Okay.
Which lab is that?
Berkeley? It wasn't Berkeley.
No,
Lawrence Livermore?
Lawrence Livermore.
Okay.
Yeah. So they apparently when Scotty, he's the engineer of the big Enterprise, and, he's upset because they're trying to take off and he doesn't like some of the luggage on the ship. I'm gonna spoil the movie for you.
Okay.
You need to see it.
Okay.
But the background is I think it's a like atom collider thing at Lawrence Livermore. I think they have a little one. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Or it might be a fusion thing. But I don't know if those are the same thing. Fusion's different than colliding.
Yes,
stuff.
but
Yeah. Anyways,
along the same lines.
I was getting at, like you said, there's dozen plus of these labs. And at the, I assume at the DOE and the Pentagon level, there's missions that are somewhat dictated, right? And then so y'all took on industrial security recently. Is that because we don't want adversaries hacking into dams or
Correct
manufacturing plants, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's interesting. So and I'm familiar, like, doesn't I know they do some refueling even for the Navy, like nuclear rods there and
yeah, so that's kind of the basis of INL, right? Is the nuclear Navy, the training of the Navy nukes. There's stories, right, of all of the Navy guys in their white attire standing on the side of the road, getting on the buses to go out to the middle of nowhere. So yes, very heavy history with the Navy.
Cool.
Yeah.
I should tell you, my wife and I planned a trip this spring break with our kiddos to the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva.
Oh.
So again, I don't know if any of our labs do that, right? I think we have one of those this is way beyond me sort of stuff, but like they didn't teach this in economics either.
They did. I missed that class, I guess.
Yeah. So in Geneva, there's this I think it's 17 or 20 kilometer circumference, biggest collider in the world. And they're bringing particles together near the speed of light. And there's a visitor center and all that. So we're doing our kids are almost the age where we're probably just not able to have a big trip.
I was going to say, did your kids specifically request this as their trip?
This is my idea.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. I got away with it because I committed to doing a chocolate tour in Geneva that afternoon.
Okay.
So it's like morning at they call it ITER.
Okay.
ITER, I think, is the acronym in French. And then ITER in the morning and then Geneva town tour in the afternoon and evening.
Okay. So that sounds like a compromise.
Yeah. Those places, they make them pretty cool though.
Yeah.
Like
they do.
I was just out at the Cape Canaveral, actually. I hadn't been there and actually seen a launch pad, and then I got to go to the Kennedy Space Center, and it's like I could spend like a day there. It's
at least
incredible.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So my kids, they enjoy that stuff, but it is important not to shove it down their throats.
Well, and they'll appreciate it in 2 decades or whatever.
Yeah.
So just know that even if they complain and they just want to go to the chocolate factory, 20 years from now, they'll be very grateful you took them.
Exactly. That's what I hope. So yeah. Yeah. You have kiddos?
I do not.
Yeah.
No kiddos. Yeah.
You're quite young.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. No.
And you're the first economist at INL that you said.
First labor economist.
Yeah.
Specifically doing labor economics work. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 25.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Wow. So we met just today
We did.
because we're at this thing. So I'll give my version of where we're at for people, and then love to hear why you're here and what, because I was intrigued what you spoke about, because it's sort of the cross section of workforce development and labor economics and the future needs of industry. But this is the American Nuclear Society. I think this is where we're at, right? Yeah, just kidding. Conference on training education. So there's a lot of, I mean, most of the nuclear power station companies are represented here. So Southern Nuclear and Dominion and Constellation, et cetera. And a lot of contractors like Westinghouse, Curtiss-Wright, et cetera. And it's put on by, I can't quite figure out, American Nuclear Society, I'm a little bit familiar with, but then there's the Nuclear Energy Institute.
NEI, yep.
Yep. And I was actually invited by a friend of mine from EPRI.
Oh, yeah.
Electric Power Research Institute. He almost put this whole thing together, Chuck Leese. And, but then he couldn't come. Like, do you know him?
I don't know him, but I work with EPRI folks.
Yeah.
But
I think there was a double booking of it. And I think there's an EPRI event this week.
Oh, okay.
That's what I overheard. Well, so incredible group. And then tell us about your panel today and like what you all discussed.
So I was asked to speak with some other leaders in the industry, specifically about like just kind of the industry makeup, the forecast for what's going on, where we're headed. Ultimately, what I thought was interesting about the handful of panelists that they chose for that opening plenary session is that each of us represent a different region of the United States that has a kind of first mover status in nuclear, advanced nuclear specifically.
Yep.
And so it was a really nice cross section between, you know, some of our historical nuclear concentrated communities.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that this morning too.
What's a historical versus
like
that's a polite way of saying it.
yeah, you know, like Michigan and Georgia and some of these states have traditional nuclear power plants. Tennessee
right?
Certainly.
Yeah.
And they've been you know, providing nuclear electrical generation to the United States for many moons. Whether people in the United States know that or not. Yeah. And that was part of the conversation
shout out
today.
to Washington State too. They're part of the Manhattan Project.
They are,
right? So what was it? Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
The three first reactors in the country. I mean, I don't know to what extent, but they're certainly Manhattan Project.
Yep.
Cool. And then, so what is advanced nuclear mean?
So when we say advanced nuclear, we just mean you know, newer technologies or different footprints of the same exact technology, right? So we're talking about historic nuclear, these huge cement silos, right, that take up a massive amount of footprint and produce, you know, respectively that amount of power. Small modular reactors and micro reactors has really kind of been the main focus of the advanced nuclear wave. Although in the last year, we're now talking about not just restarting historically traditional nuclear plants, but building ones that are similarly sized. So I think at all three layers of generation, right, that's what we're talking about is advanced nuclear, really the same technology in what I would consider to be like hyper efficient space. Yeah. And in different sizes so they can be used for different things.
I've listened to friends in the industry tell me about BWRs and PWRs and XYZs, and I think there's some newer generation 4 stuff.
Oh, yes.
Like all this stuff. I've got a really good mentor who was a aerospace engineer, but then went through nuclear Navy school and had a reactor license, and it's just this whole other world that you really, I mean, it's an industry, and it's a really impressive industry. So even looking at some of the apprenticeships available with some of the utilities, it was interesting that you know, even someone going into maintenance is going to have fundamental training on nuclear fission and fusion nuclear energy in general, and all that stuff. So
safety protocols, culture, you name it.
Radiation, that stuff. Yeah. So we could nerd out on that for a while, but I think you would exhaust my question. I don't even know what to ask, but it's fascinating. I'm really excited about the Renaissance. I've heard things like, I'd be curious how you've evaluated demand, because I mean, I've heard crazy things like the state of California, just to electrify their transportation fleet is going to require a 2x of energy output, right? So like, I'm assuming it's kind of odd when you did the research initially for INL, it was based on research needs for that facility, right? What work have you done around understanding the nuclear industry's, labor demand in general and the growth of the industry?
A lot. So that workforce projection work that I did for the laboratory was kind of a catapult, right? So then we were able to have these really robust discussions. We were starting to figure out where these major holes and gaps were, or starting to efficiently place resources, and all that's dandy specifically for the lab. But of course, INL is not the only industry player in Idaho or in the West in nuclear.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of partners, industry partners, whether they're deployment companies or suppliers or what have you, that are all also looking for the same workforce.
Yeah.
And so as that conversation started to elevate, we recognized that we don't have kind of an agency or an organization that is doing that work on behalf of the industry, right? We have it for the lab. Some of these companies can say, oh, I see these things coming down. I have this much on my books, so this is what I can assume, whatever. So we founded a 501c6 called the Idaho Advanced Energy Consortium specifically to do that work. So on an annual basis now, we look at kind of the makeup of the deployment programs and projects that are specific to the state of Idaho. Ultimately, that'll grow past state borders for a lot of reasons, but we spend a lot of time with Idaho National Laboratory, with our two larger contractors, which is the Navy and the Idaho Environmental Coalition, which is the Idaho cleanup side of things. And then all of our deployment partners to really think about that landscape, 10, 15, 20 years out. What does that mean? Where are the deployment projects at? Are the reactors, anticipated to be commercially used? Are they test reactors? And what kind of workforce are you going to need to build every single one of those, regardless of their use?
Yeah.
How all that timeline shakes out. And then ultimately, what's the permanent workforce need to operate all those things, while also recognizing you have some reactors that are being powered down. You have certain types of power that we're potentially transitioning out of.
Yeah.
And so that organization was stood up specifically to kind of coalesce around these conversations and start to produce some of this data so we could really talk about it.
Yeah.
So we've done that twice now. We've just published our second annual report just in December, actually.
Nice.
But it's the kind of the first foundational piece of data that exists for the Intermountain West as far as like a collective effort towards what are the impacts of the workforce, how many thousands of people are we talking about, et cetera.
Yeah. You said deployment partners are those education providers primarily? Deployment meaning like getting workforce ready?
Deployment meaning like reactor deployment.
Oh,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So
new reactors
yep.
online,
yep.
whatever.
Because ultimately they're going to be the ones that tell us,
Totally.
it's going to take me 360 people to operate my, 12 modular reactor.
Gotcha.
So
yeah,
we got to work with them to figure out what that is.
And is the scope of that currently, when you say Intermountain West, is that all the way to California?
When we say Intermountain West, we're talking typically Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, although keeps growing, right?
Yeah.
Montana wants in the game. We're doing some projects with Washington right now.
Yeah.
Colorado, just doing some work with Colorado. So that's kind of Northwest more than anything.
Yeah.
The policy side of things has been interesting in nuclear for a long time. I think energy policy in general. But as bipartisan as nuclear has become, we're starting to see some of these coalitions cross, typically not friendly state lines,
Sure.
Which is exciting. So I don't think that California is far off from that participation.
Yeah. Especially I get to work a lot in the skilled trades roles, right? So frontline maintenance folks, construction trades, et cetera. And especially when those trades are cross industry, it's like doing a shutdown at a plant and then going to do a build out of a new facility or whatever. Having first of all, sharing that intel would be very valuable, but it's also kind of you just have this difference in the labor needs, right? It's full-time people versus surge staff.
Yep.
So does NEI or the Nuclear Energy Institute or American Nuclear Society, do they put out general data as well around plants under construction? What I like about the nuclear industry is it's like finite. There's a set
You
number
can
of
capture it.
reactors in the country
Yeah.
and globally. EPRI also seems to do a lot of good data there, right? So like, kind of how are you coalescing that with your research?
Yeah, they do. All three of those organizations put out information. You know, they take it from a national approach, but ultimately the development and deployment is happening in a handful of areas of the country. So to your point, finite, it's controllable in some capacity. So we lean on that information. We reference it all the time.
Yeah.
What I think has been the most impactful piece of work, quite frankly, to maybe unwind is the DOE liftoff reports that you heard mentioned this morning, where the DOE did a series of liftoff reports.
And I remember this now. A liftoff is what? A brand new build, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm leading the witness.
I'm like, a liftoff is lots of things.
Yes.
Yeah. For them, it was new nuclear developments. Yep. So new construction. Correct.
So liftoff is brand new.
Yep.
Greenfield, and a restart is brownfield, I guess.
Certainly.
Okay.
So for their report specifically, they were looking at new construction for new advanced reactors. And those numbers were excessively high, not in a way that they aren't accurate, just like it was stunning to the,
you think, or
no, not necessarily. Actually, it probably is relatively close, at least still at this point. But the reason it was stunning is because we hadn't done any national work, right?
Yeah.
So even just taking the first attempt at it, and seeing those numbers at that scale was
so remind me. I was paying attention, but I have no relative gauge here. So like, how many new builds were they talking about? 30?
You know, it's been a couple of years since they published. 30 is probably close, but they were looking at about 350,000 jobs additional.
I remember that bar chart from the chief nuclear officer, right? And I'll hopefully throw it up on the screens. People can check it out, download it. But yeah, it's incredible. The number I recall was by 2035. I think it was there a shortage?
Well,
that was the need.
Yeah,
that new need.
New need, yeah. So that doesn't even count, you know, replacement at current fleets or replacements at the laboratories that do the same type of skilled work.
So, and do you recall the number at 2035? Was it like 300,000? Was it like 800,000?
I think it was like 120,000. Then we're inching our way up to 350.
Gotcha.
Who knows?
And so do you have any idea how many people the nuclear industry currently employs, just in plants, not supply chain?
I don't, which is tough because the way that the BLS describes that data is it's just like electrical generation and utilities. So being parsed out specifically to nuclear is not as clear.
I'm sure ANS has it.
I'm sure they do.
The labs are impressive how large they are.
Yes.
You said INL 6,000 people. I think I'd imagine San Diego, Los Alamos are similar. And,
yes.
How the heck are we going to, how are we going to find people to fill these jobs? Like, what are you encouraging? So it's first of all, it's hard enough to find PhDs. You're saying it for INL. I assume the bulk, again, that bar chart was broken down into kind of like operations and maintenance folks, even construction. I think, you know, they had, at a operating plant, it's primarily operational
operations and maintenance.
So I mean, do you have a silver bullet?
Like no. I'd be so much richer and I wouldn't be working. So you've got those layers, right? You have like the direct employment, like you were talking about, like the operations, the engineers that are currently working for those deployment companies that are trying to get these licenses through the NRC. And then, you know, that fleet will grow as more companies populate. And then when you actually put it in the ground, right, you've got the spike of construction workforce. You also have the spike of supplier workforce. You need the manufacturers, the fabricators, you name it. And they all have to come along with us so that the parts show up at the site at the right time, those kinds of things. And then you've got the permanent workforce, which will be operations, maintenance, primarily management, that kind of thing. And then there's the indirect workforce, right? So wherever you take a concentration of people and drop them, regardless of where that is. There's a indirect layer to that where you're talking about
Totally.
schools and hospitals and restaurants and all
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So really, that's kind of where my role is centered on, is anytime there's a, you know, an inkling or whisper of, oh, you know, so-and-so company, we could potentially locate here. If that's within, you know, what I would consider my region of service, it's our role to try to facilitate decision making that is as data driven as possible, recognizing what the labor market availability is, what the potential is to make sure that there's enough labor to get there, you know, what the impacts are to those communities, you know, and having all those conversations. That's why that network with the community colleges, the universities, and those community leaders is so important.
Yeah.
Because anytime, you know, a decision like that is made, it's a massive change. And if you don't have the infrastructure put in place ahead of time, you know, the likelihood of that project sustaining to commercialization is lower. Because there's too many barriers.
And we seem to have delays in construction for in nuclear, right? I mean,
Yes.
So it's, I know we haven't built many. Well, we've had Vogel come online.
Vogel 3 and 4,
since
yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Is that it?
2021, 2020, yeah.
And then even the 15 years prior to that, we might have had one or
Maybe,
two.
yeah.
Right. So,
and one of the biggest holdups in the Vogel build was simply trades workforce.
Yeah.
Cost escalation and timeline runoff was specific to labor force.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think your question was, you know, what's the silver bullet? I don't think that there is one. One, this is a mix of like an occupational crowding issue, right? So how can we shake that up? And the more places the nuclear is located, the better chance that we have of that, right? You have more exposure, more access. People don't have to leave their homes necessarily if all the nuclear deployments are happening in one state.
Yeah.
It will be more difficult than if you kind of spread that out.
Sure.
But ultimately we have a warm body issue. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
Our replacement rates are low. Immigration policy plays a big role in how we can and can't fill jobs. And how we expose students to those opportunities, or quite frankly, even the workforce.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who just don't know what their opportunities are in nuclear.
Yeah.
And being able to find a way to access those people, not necessarily to take them from other industries, but show them what their opportunities are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember going to school. I didn't know. You could have asked me 9 out of 10 occupations in high school as a senior.
Yeah.
And I would not have been able to tell you like what they did.
Yeah.
At all.
Certainly.
So I think we just finished a study that we haven't publicized it yet, but we're calling, I mean, the working title is like the skilled workforce maturity model. So what are the stages that a person and an employer sort of go through, and simply put, it's recruiting, it's recruit, ramp, results, and retain.
Okay.
And then any organization can score as really poorly or really well, right? But that in the recruit phase, that just the talent awareness issue is one of the biggest issues. And first of all, if we don't advise people what is out there, that's the first challenge.
Yep.
Second challenge is we can enable bad decisions too. Like my generation, a lot of us were told just go to college. Right?
Yeah, certainly.
So we really hope we're getting behind a organization potentially. This is kind of a cool story. The Make It movement.
Okay.
And this gentleman, his name is Roy Spence. He coined the term "Don't mess with Texas."
Okay. Okay.
He's this guy.
Okay, love it.
And he is a spitfire of a Texan. I just moved to Austin myself the past year, and he was the co-founder of GSD&M. It's one of the ad agencies, marketing agencies. So he went to UT Austin. He started this marketing agency, and then he's 70, 75 now. He's grew this agency from the ground up with some friends, and that the Don't Mess with Texas was the DOT. DOT was the customer. Another big one he did was like all the Southwest Airlines TV ads that happened in the 80s and 90s. And he tells a great story about how he was collaborating with their CEO and they came up with, they're not in the, I can't remember, I'm going to mess up his term, but ultimately the tagline was, now you are now free to move about the country.
Yes.
Anyways, he's recognized with some big industrials that this issue of the talent awareness issue is like paramount. And he wanted to take his marketing and advertising skills to that problem. So he started the Make It movement with several foundations. And basically, watching football games, college games in Texas this fall, you'd see commercials of Make It movement. And their mission is to put a poster in every high school in America that has a QR code on it, but it's for, there's an acronym out of the workforce dev space called STARS.
Okay.
And it's regarding all students with alternative pathways. I can't remember the whole acronym, but
Okay.
People, I mean, and it's a weird way to say it, but it's like, it's not gonna be alternative for long,
Right.
but it's just like micro learning or smaller programs or, career specific training.
Yep.
And anyways, you scan the QR code and then a kid can go through the career exploration exercise and then get to this website called Skill Up. And Skill Up is a similarly funded nonprofit that is kind of like a career marketplace. So companies can put jobs on there, but also training programs, apprenticeship programs from schools. And then kids can explore careers and apply and whatnot. So he's aiming to solve that talent awareness issue. And we talked, the last session I was in here, people talked about the general challenge that there's so many overlapping initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing about like a free market economy is that
it's also inefficient.
Yeah. But inefficient sometimes. Yeah. And when it's a lot of noise. Like if you think about the career marketplaces that are out there, plus everyone and their sister has a kind of like a skilled workforce recruiting thing going on.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking, I'm literally pinging all the ones that I'm involved with.
Yeah, exactly. And it's confusing to the high schools.
Of course.
I mean, it'd be it would require central planning to fix it, which isn't, no one wants that really, but
that's why I spent so much time this morning talking specifically about like localization and regionality, right? Ultimately, one of the strengths of the American economy is how diverse it is. But and what we've seen historically is like, we'll use a state like Utah, whose economic makeup is very reflective of the United States, like almost to the percentile. And they have been pretty recession resistant because of it.
In terms of the GDP at the state level?
Just like diversity of industry mix.
Gotcha.
And so because of that, they can weather a lot of storms.
but ultimately inefficient, right? To have that much mix within one locality.
Yeah.
And specifically for workforce planning. Other areas of the country not have more success. Utah actually does a really nice job with workforce development and education, but you know, it's a lot easier to go, okay, we're gonna basically deploy nuclear in 3 parts of the country. Let's say that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
And then you have, you know, mass efforts to do that. But manufacturing is one that's tough, right? Because you've got small, medium, large size manufacturers. We're talking about onshoring manufacturing, and we want to make sure that those jobs are represented across the country. But then trying to uplift a workforce in every single part of every single state to meet the manufacturing demand is excessively difficult and quite frankly inefficient. Not because it's not worth it, just to your point, it takes a lot of efforts and a lot of different ways to connect with students and parents and the current workforce and explain to them how this industry is different from that industry and how this company is different from that company. And it's really difficult. It's a large hill to climb.
Yeah. And I like more of a collaborative solution there because it's not competitive. Like, I mean, we don't want the government picking winners and losers, right?
Yep.
So like but yeah, it would be, it is like, in some cases, it's like saying, in some cases, monopolies are helpful, right? Not that term, but you understand what I'm saying. Like it's, when there is when there's critical mass and economies of scale, and if every employer in the country, for example, was pointing to the clearinghouse or the career marketplace for skilled workers, that probably would get really efficient.
Sure.
And everyone could be singing off the same song sheet, and there's jobs hopefully throughout the whole country and all that, but it will never happen. But I'm curious. One thing we're evaluating is, can we take a message like that to our customers and get a scaled solution that'll really work nationally? But I've also worked at associations where if you're an employer in one county or a 5-county area, like, your best bet is put all your effort into grassroots type stuff and maybe relocating people there, but they don't care about the national issue. It's not their problem, right? So
I think regionality is really right in the middle of that, right? Where like we can find more efficiencies than we're currently utilizing. That doesn't mean that we're going to end up in the ultimate efficiency of a monopoly, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of benefit to competition, even within our borders.
Yeah.
And I from the capitalistic side of my economic theory, there's a lot of reasons to lean into that. Within reason.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, you never know what message is we don't know if the Make It Movement message is going to be the right message today. Like, we think it's a great message, and but having several messages is super helpful and might reach people differently. So that's important. But it's going to be a super interesting next 5 or 10 years. I'm very excited about nuclear, and then with the backdrop of like agentic AI, and I mean, a lot of knowledge worker roles are going to get completely, I don't know if you follow some of the AI experts in the world, like Kai-Fu Lee or Andrew Ng. I mean, one of them has said as much as like half of all job tasks will be replaced by 2030. And he's not saying half of all workers will be displaced, but breaking
very important.
It is.
Definition
I knew you would get that as a labor economist.
And I think ultimately, right, with the labor shortage issues that we have, we need that. We need an alternative solution to some sets of skills so that people can basically like plus up what they're doing in their day to day, and let generative AI or whatever technology manage some of the stuff that we don't need labor hours for.
I was curious, 5 or 6 years ago, I had this thought, like, are we going to be cross training, reskilling loan officers to become iron workers? And it's such a different, I mean, that you really get into the psychology of every individual. Like, a person has to really desire to do, that sort of, finish my thought there. I mean, work is painstaking when people don't enjoy it. Right?
Yeah,
so,
certainly.
I'm trying to remember this. You'll like this actually also. This probably doesn't hit any economics textbooks, but oh my gosh, what's the model? There's a Japanese word. It's a cross section. It's a 5-part intersection or 4-part intersection.
Okay.
And I can't remember the Japanese word. It'll come back to me, but it's like when you found something that you love doing, that the world needs, that you could be really good at. And then one other factor, but there's a little assessment you can take, and it's just about helping people find something that's not going to keep them sleeping on their parents' couch at night. But
also that they want to get up and do every day.
Totally. It's your gifts and your beliefs, or your gifts and your desire. So that's a big part of it too, is like that the maturity model I talked about is talent awareness, but then getting people down to that point where they really understand what they want to be doing. And it's like aptitude and desire.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of my favorite parts about working in the energy industry is when I graduated with an economics degree, and I was, I'm very passionate about economics.
Yeah.
To your point, I could put anybody to sleep, talk about economics for forever. My wife would disagree. She's like, please stop. But being able to parlay that into specifically, the advanced energy industry has been incredible for me. Being able to
use those skills, adapt them to an industry, one that needs that kind of support, and two, that has the potential and should change our planet.
It's the industry you're in, like, could be the most important industry next 20 or 30 years in the world. I mean, I don't know if we're gonna, if the US will allow and many other types of power generation, but it seems evident that we need more nuclear capacity, certainly investing a lot in solar and wind.
Yep.
And natural gas,
but again, that diversification, right? It's the same theory applied.
yeah,
If our portfolio is diversified, then we are, more risk tolerant. And so the more of that we can do, the safer the United States will be, the safer, our allies will be, and ultimately our grid and our access to energy will be. So the more of that we can do, the better off we are all going to be.
Have you thought about, I mean, one thing it's been interesting seeing, so we were talking about the backdrop of the massive skills gap, and then just kind of the rise of knowledge worker tasks happening with AI, cobotics or robotics, right? I don't know if you've seen Tesla's Optimus, and Boston Dynamics has been out for a long time with their robot, but I'm curious if you ever explored people working alongside robots, and I'm not talking about like a factory assembly line, but like humanoid robots, right? Like, it seems like there'd be obviously a progressive evolution of the skills and the tasks that a robot could do.
Yeah.
And I just think about the backdrop of if we need to, I'm always thinking about the hands-on workforce, but if we need to almost increase our hands-on workforce twice as fast, I don't have a good measure of this, but like, then we expect to be able to do, that's a major problem. So like, I'm curious if you've done any modeling or thoughts around how to account for field support by robotics.
I wouldn't say that we are at the place where modeling it is, I would consider it to be particularly well done. Now thought about, certainly, right? I was actually just in Washington State in Tri-Cities a couple weeks ago, and they were doing some testing with a robot dog that was specific to going around and checking utility boxes, fire extinguishers, that kind of thing. And, just maintenance. Purely, that type of work.
Inspection photos, videos.
All that kind of stuff. And then you have one person somewhere else, relatively irrelevant, that makes sure they're, human checking those things. But I think that part of this efficiency is location, right? So the concept of hands-on, to some extent, there's no getting around, right? A nuclear operator needs to be at the reactor.
I've been told.
Well,
they do.
I guess we'll see. Yes, they do, at least at this time. But, a lot of the monitoring on top of, just that reactor technician or that operator can be done remotely. And quite frankly, Curtiss-Wright is a good example of a company that does that very well. And so
what do they do?
Curtiss-Wright does a lot of things, and I'm not going to butcher their portfolio, but they do a lot of kind of remote, sensing. They have all the alarm bells, and they're basically like ADT for energy systems. How to describe
a lot of stuff is IoT device sensorized,
and they have human bodies monitoring that stuff 24/7, but they don't all have to be at that site. And as we talk about, again, that compounding labor force, those types of adjustments or capabilities are going to make or break our ability to make sure that work is done well and efficiently.
I've always struggled to this sounds silly of me, but I struggled to understand productivity as think about economics in general. And a McKinsey study got my attention about 10 years ago. It talks about how the manufacturing industry has, since like 1970, has improved its worker productivity by about 2x, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that right? The construction industry was like 0, and I could have the factors wrong, but it might have been like construction was 2x and maybe manufacturing was 8x. Something like that.
Okay.
But I'm with you. Like I think that's what I'm kind of getting at, is truly measuring productivity at the skill level. And I think you could eventually model that by, you got to have a skills ontology.
Yep.
You know, what does a job or person actually do in their job?
Yep.
How much time does that take? What's the potential replacement options or substitutes?
Yeah.
Kind of makes my head hurt.
Well, and comparing industries, right, is tough. The baseline for manufacturing, right, is to mass produce a product, right, in its most, fundamental sense. And construction is actually kind of the opposite. The idea is that you build anything. That one workforce is supposed to build houses, is supposed to build nuclear power plants, is supposed to build what have you.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a varying level of tolerability for AI in those roles and productivity enhancements in those industries. And quite frankly, that is, it's very important that we're true to that, right? Because if we tried to be overly efficient in certain areas, we will end up with problems too. There's a reason why people build homes. And there are alternatives now that we're working through, and that's great. But the more different types of things we have to construct takes a lot more time, takes a lot more labor hours. And manufacturing for a variety of reasons, we've been able to put those in controlled environments and then efficiently manage those, versus construction is like a whole different ball game, right?
Totally. Yeah. And then when you're dealing with a nuke plant construction, regulatory requirements and the steps along the way have got to be 10 or 20x is
and specifically just location, right? You're not constructing a nuclear, at least that's not at the moment. You're not constructing a nuclear plant and then shipping it to where it's going to be located, right? You do that in manufacturing, and that's kind of the idea behind the small modular reactors and the micro reactors. Is one of the major inefficiencies is that you need that entire construction workforce, 1 to 30,000 people at that location for X amount of years. Well, that's excessively inefficient, but if that's what we're doing, then you can't, auto generate that workforce. And that's why the manufacturing concept works so well, which is exactly where nuclear is hoping to head, is to get more efficient in that way.
Yeah. Modularization has been a major element of improvement, I think, in the construction world. It's even the modular homes, are coming about. You should meet one of my friends, Curtis. He's with Brick and Mortar Ventures. It's one of the largest, one of the most well-known construction tech venture capital groups. And this guy eats and dreams about just productivity primarily in construction. And I love how they they think about the world in terms of the build phase, operate phase, and maintain phase. That probably oversimplifies it, but the SMR world is going towards that, right? That's the concept, is as much modular manufacturing as possible, on-site assembly. And
then to ship it to the site. The site's prepped with very little, workforce, human body necessity in that temporary space, and then get it operating and build your fleet.
In terms of the types of roles, even though they presented today, like what types of worker are you most, let's prioritize them. Like what types of worker or what types of the workforce are you most concerned about our ability to fill? When you think about, there's supply and demand issues, and then productivity issues, and maybe the other factors like automation.
My two, the ones that keep me up at night, which we need to kill that phrase now, is engineering and trades. Just carte blanche. Engineering is the deficit is getting larger. And to your point, our generation, the answer was you go to college. Well, that's shifted for a variety of reasons. One being that was never the answer for everybody, and should not have been. And now we have a deficit in the trades for exactly that reason. But also we're seeing a really major social and cultural shift, especially in men in the United States, opting out of higher education. Well, you can't become an engineer unless you go to higher education. And so being able to shift back into,
creating access for all people to choose an engineering pathway if that's what they would like to, if they have the aptitude for it, and make that as barrier free as possible is becoming increasingly more difficult, and that deficit's getting larger. And then on the trade side, right, we did ourselves a disservice by encouraging everyone into a bachelor's degree, which for a lot of reasons was necessary. And now we're recognizing, you know, kind of the valley we've created in trades folks. And so we're back in that space, plus up all the demand.
Yeah.
And so, you know, those are the two that I spend an excessive amount of time, my team and all the people that I work with focusing on. Of course, there's plenty of others that pop up as also priorities, but I would focus my attention on those two.
Succinct. I like it.
Yeah.
Those are good. It seemed like we could do as a country a really good job of recruiting. I'm sure we do H-1B visa folks from abroad, right? That I'm assuming we've done a lot of that and a lot more in the past 20 or 30 years. But I'm with you. Yeah. My brother's a civil engineer. I think I saw his book on dirt one time. So mechanics. I was like, I'm not going to study that.
I'm out. Thanks.
Yeah. And
even bridging that like social gap, right? Like my brother's a machinist who the kid is wicked brilliant, right? It's aggravating.
Yeah.
I hate him. So damn smart. But he just is like, I don't want to go to school for 4 more years.
Yeah.
Which is so frustrating because I'm like, I understand, but also you could be, you know, a lead engineer. You could be drawing projects. And, you know, machining, he's wicked good at it. But I'm like, you're bored, you know?
Is he bored?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't blame him, you know, and he gets to do all the specialty projects and the stuff by hand when the CNC doesn't do the job well enough. Like he's that kid in the shop.
Yeah.
But the barrier for someone like that really has a high level of productivity, you know, a very intelligent person, that is a barrier. Taking 4 years off or even part-time for 5 or 6, like they don't have any interest in that. And I don't blame them, right? They're living. But how do you encourage the people that have the aptitude for it and the interest and are even in the field? Like we need you in this next level. It's really tough.
It'll come down to wages. Those roles will hit a labor rate that people just can't refuse eventually, right?
Yep.
And I don't know what else we'll do it. There seems like it's been odd how do you have any idea what has caused the lack of interest in STEM and engineering programs in general the past 20, 30 years? It's kind of surprising because we, you know, as a country, space program and incredible manufacturing. I'm just thinking out loud here with you, but
I don't think it's a lack of interest, actually. I think it's strictly a barrier, and I would boil it all the way down to math. If a student has a bad experience or, you know, experiences some type of very significant barrier, often linked to math somewhere in the K-12 system or even early higher education, that is a exit left from an engineering program. And we don't have a lot of safety nets in place for those barriers.
You know, you should talk to, I'm sure you're familiar with like the German model, how they handle from, I think it's like middle school up, right? There's a group called Ford Next Generation Learning. They kind of came out as a foundation out of Ford Motor Company, and they retool school districts to that sort of German model. That's the way I put it. I've never heard them say that. But that's how I think about what they're doing. And I think they mostly work at the high school level. Like essentially your freshman year is your exploratory year, and then you're supposed to pick a discipline. I saw like your last 3 years, and could be engineering, it could be a trade. I mean, I think they go as broad as like construction trades, you know, healthcare or whatever. And then even your English class is taught a little bit differently to those disciplines. But you're allowed to go back and forth or switch if you need to. And I think that's a brilliant concept. And when you talk about engineer, like somebody getting turned off quickly from a job, it's like it happens less likely if you've taken a whole year to really evaluate what you might want to do. I gotta go see one of those schools.
Let me know how it is.
Yeah.
It's another one of those, you know, immediate clashes, right? Of a free market as far as
Yeah.
education is concerned versus something that is significantly more, controlled feels strong, but
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's no different than what happens in just 4 years later,
Yeah.
you know, in university. But I think they have something like 40 or 50 school districts in the country up and running, and they go through it's like a 3 to 5 year investment to kind of get a school district implemented.
Build that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
The
I
whole
mean,
community has to be involved actually, because it's
Yeah.
like, what disciplines should we have? If you
correct.
roll out a bunch of disciplines no one cares about, they're going to move or
Mhm.
something, you know, they want to go to the high school.
And you ultimately want to, you know, juxtapose the workforce to the industry that's located there, right?
Totally.
It's kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I love it from an efficiency perspective. It makes a lot of sense. Socially, right? I would say, that's America's not there, for right or wrong. And does mean that that isn't, you know, where some of us should go, or that shouldn't
Yeah.
be an option, but it's interesting. Even watching how higher education has been, you know, changing over the last handful of years and how they're, trying to manage those pipelines earlier. We
Yeah.
heard a lot today of like, how do we get into kindergarten classrooms?
Yeah.
We're gonna make a real push for nuclear operators in kindergarten classrooms. But yeah, these are all like massive social experiments. And I think that, like we see all the time, sometimes those things work for a period of time and then they transition for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons. So we have to figure out what works for us for now, and hopefully, you know, we've learned enough lessons so that we can adapt in the future.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. In terms of so that's the STEM side, engineering side that you're concerned about, and then trades. Talk to me a little bit about your findings around. I mean, a lot of trades are like industry transferable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, I know that I've got a really good buddy of mine who's an elevator technician in Portland, Oregon at
yeah.
PDX.
Okay.
And
Busy guy.
he is, and he talks about how it's interesting how I can't remember the union's name. You know, go through your apprenticeship at the union, and some guys will go on to get right into maintenance work.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys and gals will get into construction.
Yep.
And he's like, when he meets a mouth breather, as he says, when he meets a mouth breather,
A maintenance guy.
no.
Oh.
Mouth breather, just to him, I think he's the one who told me that, is like just someone not very intelligent.
Oh.
When he meets a mouth breather, it's like a young mouth breather. It's because they've only ever spent any time in maintenance.
Mm.
They never had to go build a project from the ground up.
Yeah. Okay.
Where you get to see the whole build, right? So, I have no idea where I was going with
I was
this.
going to say, I'm ready for the connection point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, what were we even talking about?
So STEM to trades.
Yeah.
Transferable skills among industries for trades.
That's what it was.
Okay.
It's like, the skills that he's learned are very transferable. I mean, electrical, mechanical, hydraulics, motors, gearboxes, belts, structural things, foundations. One of the, dare I say, one of the challenges is he's embedded in that space.
Mm.
So it took a 4-year apprenticeship, long time. And he's doing, I mean, he loves it, but he also would like to do something else someday.
Yeah.
Actually, right. And there are some massive change costs for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wonder, you know, just like, there's people, Clayton Christensen and Peter Thiel predicted a while ago, like half of universities will be out of business by 2030. It feels like there is a downward pressure on the length of programs too.
There is.
Yeah. Because the change costs are just a bit too high. So like shorter courses, job specific training, et cetera. I think I noticed, I don't know if the nuclear industry is trying to solve this, but it's like, feels like they were going down the same track today when I was hearing about the apprenticeships.
Yeah.
A lot of them are 4 years or 2,000 hours, I guess. Yeah. You know, but do you see an opportunity to like?
Yeah, I think, the nuclear industry in particular is difficult because the level of not necessarily education, but safety training that you
Yeah.
have to have so that we ensure safety is so significant and for good reason.
Yeah.
So if you pick the nuclear industry, you know that that is part of your requirement. You know that's part of the game.
Sure.
But for an example, like your friend, I think that there is a gray space though, right? Where there is an element of that cultural safety that's embedded just in all trades work, right?
Yeah.
If you're a construction guy and you go out on that site, like you want to come home, right? And so, and your company wants you to come home. So that's partially built in. So I actually think that the industry transfer, even to highly, regulated industries like nuclear, is not as high as starting from scratch, right? So I actually think the saving grace for the nuclear industry and the construction front is exactly that, is looking at the workforce that exists in the trades and construction and those fields that have those skill sets like your friend, and saying
transferable.
and saying, here's the benefit to you, whether that's because you're looking for a change, you're interested in the energy industry, you name it, that is accessible to you. And then that change is not so significant. But I do think kind of across all industries, America in particular is really going, how do we reduce that barrier?
Yeah.
Most of it is cost, right? Student debt is out of control. And quite frankly, people, American culture, right? We don't live in our parents' houses until we're 30 and we get married and then we are gifted a home. Like you see a lot of that in Europe, for example.
Yeah.
We don't have that same culture. So you have to have a job, you have to be earning wages, you have to pay your rent or your mortgage or whatever.
Yeah.
And the goal for American families is to have that, right? To have a single family home or whatever your dream looks like. And you have to start as early as possible if you want to make that happen for yourself.
Yeah. And it's funny, like you described something interesting in that it's not just there's confusion on the future employer side. So my friend, he currently has been trained exactly the skills he has or exactly what his job needs. And if he wanted to transfer, there's not a explicit understanding of his skills and experience documented. And then also maybe a nuclear power station doesn't have a complete understanding of what he's coming in with. So like having you should check out this other company. Actually, Andrew Ng is one of the AI thought leaders in the world. He's the chairman of a new company called Workera.ai.
Okay.
And they've got a really powerful engine around it's a skills ontology. So like it breaks down several disciplines like data science. It's mostly knowledge worker skills, but like AI skills especially. So data science, business intelligence stuff, machine learning or AI prompting, stuff like that. And it'll break down a skill into sort of a discipline into 100 or 200 skills.
Yep.
And it'll do skill-based assessment and skill-based reinforce or fill in the gap training, and then skill-based verification. And to me, that sort of is the holy grail for transportable or transferable skills. Certifications don't seem to do that. Right. Because they're really about usually a safety topic or how to work safely in some manner or how to drive a truck or operate a crane. But really understanding someone's skills is, I think we'll get there. Actually, I'm pretty excited about where we're going, and that would help you on your labor forecasting.
Sure would. and I think that's that baseline, right? Like, how do you get past the first, the computer filter on applying for a job? And it's exactly that, right? How do you recognize on the employer side what potential transferable skills exist? And as long as that employee can articulate that, then we have a connection here. You can get to that next stage. And I think the more cross that we see in the trades from industry to industry, the more experiences the hiring managers have, the more open they are to those skills that they didn't know were right or ended up being super beneficial, right? Those experiences, like, we're still human beings. So, and human beings are going to make those hiring decisions. So, expanding that amount of transferability, using that, and kind of embedding it, right? And the nuclear industry is gonna have to do that. One, we
Yeah.
literally don't have a choice. And two, I think the nuclear industry is really prepared for what that's going to cost. We recognize that we're talking about, you know, swindling employees from other places because we need, you know, people with experience. We need people that have that type of background, just, you know, fresh out of school, you know, workforce for every single job isn't going to work out. So there's a balance in there. And the nuclear industry will have to pay the price for that. And ultimately the tradespeople should benefit from having those skills and being able to articulate how they're transferable and do all that.
I totally agree. The transferability increases the value of the skill and the person, right? So it's a win-win-win, although there's certainly going to be industry competition. That's why we have comparative advantage.
Oh,
right.
certainly.
So, well, Hope, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad we met, and you'll be around the next few days, and you're taking off Thursday.
Taking off on Thursday.
Yeah. Me as
Gotta get
well.
home to the snow. So
Cool.
Yeah.
And Boise.
in Boise. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll be sharing your info with everybody, and
Perfect.
it's really good to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Hands that craft and minds that spark, building dreams out of the dark. Wires, pipes, steel and wood, they make it real, they make it good. Built up, we rise, we shine, turning bolts and installing lines. From the ground up, we proclaim the built-up spirit fuels the flame. Plumbers flow in every stream, carpenters carve out our dreams, technicians fix in every part, linemen lighting every start. Build up, we rise, we shine, turning bolts and installing lines. From the ground up, we proclaim the built-up spirit fuels the flame. Through the grit and through the grind, every gear and every bind, they're the heartbeat of this land. Dirty hands, the master plan. Maintenance keeps the world in play, keeping systems in the fray. Every spark and every beam